But we also discovered that there were kids that actually thrive better in that virtual world. And so because of that, the district's position is that we need to provide that as an avenue for those kids. So that goes back to.
Welcome to the Please Raise Your Virtual Hand podcast. We are so delighted to dive into the exciting, challenging, and sometimes messy world of virtual learning, where nothing is impossible and redefining student success is possible. Low Country Education Consortium aims to open up new possibilities for parents, students, and our business and industry partners as we fundamentally transform learning for students. We will hold your virtual hand throughout this series, where we will discuss the world of virtual learning and how we are preparing our students for college, careers, and jobs that haven't been created yet. Virtual learning may be new to you, but it's here to stay. So, let's get started.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Please Raise Your Virtual Hand. We're your hosts, Amy McKenzie
and Matt Novielli.
Today, we will be speaking with Mr. Don Kennedy, the Superintendent of Charleston County School District. Welcome, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
We're so happy to have you. It's our understanding that you have quite a distinguished career and that you are a South Carolina native. So let's start our conversation with your background and the educational experiences that have led to you serving as superintendent of one of South Carolina's largest school districts.
Well, it's true. I was born and grew up here in South Carolina in a small town. 3,000 people when I was growing up, 3,000 people in the 2020 census, so it's really small. I was in college, small college in South Carolina, in Air Force ROTC. Upon graduating, I went into the Air Force as a commissioned officer, did that for a while, and then got out of the Air Force, went to work in the corporate world, in Boeing and another corporation. And then in 2004, I found myself back in South Carolina, here in Charleston County, as the chief financial and chief operating officer for the school district. So it's been a roundabout way to get back in the state. And then I left in 2007 and went other places in the country with the other school districts, and then came back in 2018.
And you must be happy to be back.
Oh, yes. So I still have family here. So, and it's culturally is what I'm in tune with.
So you are known for being passionately committed to ensuring that each and every student receives the highest quality education possible. Could you tell us a little more about how you earned this reputation?
Well, it was something that was passed on to me from my mother. So my mother she was born and reared in the same county where I grew up. She was grew up in the country, in the rural part of the country, the county rather. This was in the 1930s when she would have been in elementary school, and the schooling that she attended was a church school, African American church school. It was not a public education school because at that time in South Carolina, in my county, education was not provided to African American kids. But education was so important to her family that once she graduated, left elementary school, her father sent her to Columbus, Ohio to attend junior high school. She lived with her father's sister, so her aunt. And then once she finished junior high school, she came back to South Carolina and went to a boarding school for high school. And then she has a background that she was a cafeteria manager where I attended, and my brothers and sisters attended elementary school. And then when all eight of us, my brothers and sisters and I, we graduated college, my mother always had this dream that she never conveyed to us, that she wanted to be a teacher. So in her 50s, she went back to school, college, got her teaching certification, and then went back into the same school system as a teacher.
Wow.
She died January of last year, 5 days after I took the job as superintendent. So my work is really around trying to further her vision. And her vision was that all children in the state of South Carolina would have an opportunity for a great education.
That is just an amazing backstory, and it just makes it feel so much more personal for you as superintendent that it's really about family and it's about connecting with everyone, and that's part of your roots and your family.
Correct, correct.
Would you describe for us your leadership style and how it's helped to shape who you are as a superintendent?
Mhm. So my leadership style is probably a little bit unorthodox. The challenge I've found in my career is that I've done so many different things, and that when I came into, in most jobs I came into, I didn't have a background in the actual work. So when I was in the Air Force, I was a crew member on an aircraft system where I controlled fighter airplanes. I became an expert at that. But then when I came into the corporate world, I went into finance, and although my undergrad degree was in the accounting, I had no experience in that work. And I was placed in leadership roles where I had to supervise people that had a lot more knowledge and experience in those financial roles. So what I ended up having to learn how to do in those roles, as well as all my roles in K-12, was to be able to rely on the experts that I managed. So the way I describe my leadership style and my success in life, whatever that may be, is my ability to embrace my ignorance, because I come into these situations where so many people have so much more knowledge and experience than I do, and instead of me trying to be the expert, I've figured out how to tame my ego and rely on the expertise of people that actually do the work.
And you don't often hear that from leaders is that they embrace the ignorance, but, it's so important to rely on your team and to have a team of good people there to advise you and assist you, and I would imagine that that helps you really understand what's going on in your district.
Well, it does, and it allows me to have a broader breadth of what's going on, because I have the ability to again rely on people that have really strong skills in leading major parts of this work in a school district.
So, being that you know what's going on in your district, you must know um, what's going on as far as the challenges that are currently facing CCSD. Could you tell us what you believe to be the biggest challenges that your district is facing?
The biggest challenge, as I see it, is the lack of progress over time for academic achievement and growth for our minority students, students in poverty. When I first came to Charleston in 2004, there was a set of schools, a set of neighborhoods, and a set of families and students that we were working to significantly increase their academic outcomes. I left in 2007. I came back in 2018. And in 2018, what astounded me when I came back was that the same schools, the same neighborhoods, the same families, different generations, the same families nevertheless, with the same schools, the same areas that we were still struggling, and in fact still struggling with today. So the biggest challenge, as I see it, is that we have not figured out how to make sustained progress over time.
There must be a plan in the works. We did read in one of the interviews that you did that you believe CCSD is poised for great things. Would you elaborate on that statement specifically, and also in general the strengths that you see in CCSD?
So we've done several things to increase my ability to believe that we have things on the right track. So one of the things that we did last year, we looked at all the data that over a time period going back to 2006, we determined where we were making progress from 2006 to 2022. Um, and then we looked at what are those things that were in place that allowed for that progress to occur. And then we saw in 2012 there was a falling off. Progress went backwards. There was no progress, and so we explored what were the things that were taken out or things that were being done in the district that prevented us, that in fact made us go backwards. And so we brought in what we called an approach of systems thinking, where I had about 100 people in the district trained on being able to probe the question of why. Why can we not make progress? And so based on that, we were able to collaborate with the school board, provided the school board with this insight. The school board went out into the community, did community engagements with, I think it was 23 engagements across the county. And based on that, the school board and the community came up with a vision of what they wanted. And so based on that vision, we created three specific goals around student outcomes. And then we have a strategy to monitor those goals. And we have strategies internally to the district that ensures that we have strong ways to implement the various strategies. So I think for me right now is the collaborative nature of what took place over the last 13 months or so. And then if we have a new school board that was elected this past November. They have not yet fully understood this process and therefore have not fully embraced it. But once they do, I think we'll be poised to, as you say, do great things for our kids.
I think that's awesome. And what's amazing is oftentimes we focus on that first part of the question, right? Where we discuss here's the things that we need to change, but it's also important to focus on those things that we're doing well. And I love that you were able to see that and identify the things that actually were working well. And most importantly, that you're connected to the community, because the community plays one of the biggest roles in what we do every single day and what you are implementing within your district. And I think that you being in touch with your constituents, with the teachers, the students, and the community is going to make that an effort that's successful.
Yeah. So, for instance, we back this past fall we created what we call the Interfaith Roundtable. So this is a group of community religious leaders from synagogues, churches, mosques, etc. So it's not just one religious group. So they meet with me on a regular basis so that I can understand what's going on in their communities. They can understand what our challenges are, and that we jointly can collaborate. So one of our key strategies is expanding early childhood education. So some of our studies that we've done have shown that some places, like the state of Mississippi, that have made tremendous progress in student outcomes around reading and math, that one of their strategies was to expand and improve early childhood education. And so we have taken that on, and as part of that work, we're engaged with this interfaith group around how we can jointly again support that effort of expanding early childhood education. So that's just one example of how to connect with the community to make progress together.
That is awesome. And it's that collaboration that truly is unique when we are talking with you, because you are hitting the nail on the head. It starts when they are young, and it starts when students are young. And from what Amy was saying, we kind of saw that within our plan. So within the plan that you guys had for that 5-year plan that you're looking at, where are you focused, or what's most important for you to be successful within that vision that you guys have?
Yeah, so we have in the plan we have three distinct goals, all based on student outcomes. So goal one is around reading literacy, improving the rate of reading that our students do. So currently, as of the latest state assessments, only 23% of our African American students read on grade level. On average, for every year going back to 2006, 82% of our African American fifth grade students leave fifth grade going into secondary schools reading below grade level. So reading is fundamental. So we've got to get that figured out. And then, so that's goal one. Goal two is math, specifically algebra in the early high school years or late middle school years. So we're trying to increase the number of students who are prepared to take Algebra 1 and then successfully complete the end of course exams on Algebra 1. The educators tell me that Algebra 1 is a gateway subject to success in high school, to success in college, et cetera. And so we have a major focus on that. And then the third goal is around college and career readiness. So the state of South Carolina has 9 indicators of whether or not a student is ready for college or careers once he or she graduates from high school. And so we're working on that. And I can tell you that when last June at our graduation ceremonies, I attended 100% of our high school graduation ceremonies. And
Wow.
and
Wow.
And as each group of kids, each high school came across the stage and I shook their hands, the question I had in my mind in each of those graduation ceremonies, are these students ready for life after high school to be successful? In a lot of cases, the answer to that question was yes. But I know in so many cases that after kids having spent 13 years in our system, they were not ready. But for me, reading is fundamental. If you can read, you can accomplish a lot of things. If you can't read, then high school and middle school would be a major struggle.
One thing I noticed about your 3 goals, it seems like you have the whole 13 years covered because the reading starting early on is so important. And then you talk about the math in high school, and then you're talking about the college and career ready. So really your plan is it's not just focusing on one grade level. It's focusing on the student's entire experience going through CCSD.
So when I say 13 years, that's from kindergarten through 12th grade. But we've actually gone much further earlier than that. So the early learning goes from 6 months up through 4-year-olds before they come into kindergarten. So you may add another at least 4 more years to that. So I would say 17-year trajectory.
Right from the start,
That's
right?
And I can tell you, I've seen that because I'm going to tell you, I saw already. I noticed from Charleston about the 4K program and how it was important and what you guys were doing for them. So you can see it every day. Every day you can see that the differences that are occurring.
One thing would call out here though is that everything that I and my team are doing, these things are not unique. So I just simply look across the country and see what's working. And the early childhood education, Boston, the city of Boston and Boston Public Schools, they've been working on this for at least a decade and a half. They've made tremendous progress. I used to be CFO at Boston Public Schools, so I've seen it firsthand. I mentioned a few minutes ago what the state of Mississippi has been doing. So we've been working with the state superintendent of education, who just not resigned, but retired from over there, trying to understand her strategies around reading. So we're just taking a look at what's working across the country and then reaching out to those folks and then replicating what they're doing.
You have already received the data of student achievement from 2022, and I'm sure you've had time to reflect upon it, and I'm sure you're looking at that very carefully. I'd like to know, what are your biggest takeaways from that data, and has that data caused you to update your plans in any way?
So I mentioned that we looked at data and strategies going back to 2006. We looked at what was working. We looked at what when we stopped making progress, what wasn't working, what we had removed from the system. So one of the things that happened around 2012, 2013 was the district went away from a standard reading curriculum for all of our elementary schools, and we stayed away from that for up until a year and a half ago. So now we have a standard curriculum in 36 or so, about 47 elementary schools. The data that you're talking about for 2022 is a reflection of some of the implementation of that curriculum, that reading curriculum, and so it's very, very promising. And so my reflection is that if we stay the course, then we will make the progress that we need. For example, I mentioned that in 2006 through 2012, we had steady growth for all of our ethnicity groups. And so for African Americans, had we continued on that growth pattern, today we would, instead of being at 23.1% of our African American kids reading on grade level, we would be around 56 or 57% on grade level. And so my hope and my plan is that as we work through this and look at the data and the success of that data, that we stay on the path so that over time for me right now, 2027, we can get to where we need to be.
One thing we've noticed about your 5-year plan is the term guardrails.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share with our listeners more about what those guardrails are and why they're important to your plan?
Yeah, so I mentioned the school board went out last year into the community, had these 23 community engagements, and came back and create the goals based on the three goals we talked about, based on based on the data, based on the community engagement. And so the goals represent the vision of the community. So the community says, we want our kids to be able to read, we want our kids to be able to do math well. We want our kids, after spending 13 years in your system, to be ready for life, college, career, military, whatever that is. And so that's the vision. But then in conjunction with the vision, the community has a certain set of values. And those values then are captured in the guardrails. So the guardrails are framed in almost in a situation, in a statement like the superintendent shall not, or the superintendent shall. And so, for example, the first guardrail is that the superintendent shall not allow students to graduate without soft skills and skills in financial literacy. So in the community engagement, what the board found out that our business community wanted students coming out of our system, going into the workforce, in addition to have the academic skills, have soft skills to be able to navigate through whatever people have to navigate through in an organization. And then students, so part of this community engagement included high school students. And so students said, we also want to be financially literate when we come out of high school. So you all adults, y'all need to provide us with that type of training. So that's guardrail number one. So that represents a value of the system.
I think that's so important too. And the fact that you're mentioning it's not just about, those skills of reading and math, because those are important and they're fundamental, but that's not the only thing you need once you graduate high school.
Correct.
When you leave high school, you need to have those skills of being an adult, being financially literate, knowing how to, save your money or budget your money. That's hugely important for 18-year-olds who are maybe leaving home and going out on their own for the first time.
Exactly.
And I'm going to jump in because, there's something that you notice when you look at a bunch of different schools and districts, is you see a lot of plans and actionable items, but reading through the goals and the guardrails was awesome. And I want to be honest with you, because a few key points. The goals were clear and transparent. You had a specific focus of what you wanted. It made it attainable and understandable to anybody that was reading it. As I went in and I read it, and I could see what your vision was. And then the guardrails were your driving factor. How were you going to achieve that? They were your guide to reaching those goals. And it wasn't just the focus of academics. You're acknowledging that there's more than academics that go into things. Those soft skills, if anyone's listened to this before, I am a huge advocate of soft skills, and they play such an important role into everyday life. But then also looking into the second guardrail, the social emotional learning, which is extremely important in this day and age. And then the third guardrail, where you're working with all of the stakeholders. And, that's what I found most impressive, is you gave everybody responsibility. It wasn't just put on the board's shoulders, it wasn't put on your shoulders. It was dispersed among the community, the students, the teachers, the parents, the administration. Everybody plays their role. And I think that is what is so unique and so different, and what makes this have that potential to be extremely successful.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So what's not shown in the goals and the guardrails are the strategies that we have in place, or we're developing, designing to put in place. So one of those strategies associated with the stakeholder piece that you mentioned, Matt, is the creation of what we're calling a pre-K to 12 ecosystem. And so I have someone on staff assigned full-time on that work. And it's a recognition that the well-being of children in the community is not the sole responsibility of the school district. And so one of my concerns here in Charleston is that for so many years we've had the fingers pointed at the school district and saying you're doing a poor job by our kids. But the reality is it is a community responsibility, the village concept, if you will. And so if we are going to say to the community, we want your involvement, we as a district have to be open. We have to be able to make sure that we give the community members, organizations, the opportunities to not only understand what we're doing, but also to influence what we're doing. And
I
that's
love
what
it.
Guardrail 3 allows us to do, a guardrail around the stakeholder engagement.
I love it. And like we were saying, you're giving people actionable items. I was reading about the microburst where you
Mhm.
have the students that are actually taking part in what they're doing and learning those soft skills. You have the teachers,
Mhm.
they're working through letters program and they are learning how to become better teachers by understanding literacy more. And I was reading, it was amazing to read that, about half of the um, institutes that prepare teachers are only preparing about half of them to be successful literacy teachers. And the fact that you are going back and then covering your bases and structuring that concrete foundation of how to be a good literacy teacher, you're providing the tools to each one of those stakeholders to be successful and accountable.
That's correct. So in both points where we have many of our schools of educations and colleges that are not preparing their students that come in as teachers in our system to teach reading. And so the letters training, which is based on the science of reading, is a strategy to overcome that. And so what we have just put in place, we just put it in place in the last couple of weeks, is a requirement that all of our um, kindergarten through third grade teachers and other staff in school at that level take the letters training. And so over the next 3 years. So we have the first cohort of 400 staff. I think it's like that. The last we just opened up for registration. It was like I think 227 slots had been filled the last time I looked, which was yesterday.
That's awesome.
That's wonderful training, and it goes right back to your goals. It goes right back to your guardrails. It just seems like every step you're taking is really well thought out and all working towards that goal of meeting your 5-year plan.
Right. So I'm always looking at what's happening elsewhere, up in Fairfax County, Virginia, Fairfax County School District. We're looking at some of their data, and they're requiring their elementary school teachers up to the third grade to take the LARDS training. And there are some outside groups that are pushing for that. And the reason why is because the reading gap between African American students and white students there in Fairfax County School District is like 17 points. So white students outperforming African American students by 17 points in reading. So that's a problem for them. And here in Charleston, the gap is 54 points over
Wow.
over three times. So we have to put strategies in that are working in order to do that. Because here's something I was at an event a couple Saturdays ago, a family expo, and there was a gentleman that was talking. I just happened to walk up in the conversation, so I wasn't a part of the conversation. And he was saying to the group that this little small group he was talking to that the state of South Carolina is pregnant with opportunities. Um, Meaning that we have Boeing here in this part of the state. We got Volvo, Mercedes-Benz. You go up to the upper part of the state. They got all these manufacturers up there. So we have so much opportunities here that we didn't have when I was growing up as a kid. And what his concern is that as South Carolina gives birth to all these opportunities, if we don't prepare our kids, yeah, well, they're not going to be. They and their families are not going to be able to take advantage of those opportunities.
That's so true, and we want to keep those jobs and those opportunities available for our students who are South Carolina natives,
Right.
because otherwise, what are we preparing them for?
Exactly.
Let me ask you this: what are your thoughts on the role of technology in education, and in your opinion, how can it be leveraged to benefit students and benefit teachers and benefit our community?
Yeah, so for me, I mean, the question of technology is a tough question for me, frankly. Not that I don't embrace technology, I do. And the reason why it's tough, in terms of what does technology offer in terms of maybe transformation here in education. And now, if I reflect on my life, going back into uh, like high school, for example, well, what I operated on was a typewriter.
Mhm.
And then when I went to college, I still had a typewriter. In fact, my parents bought me a portable electric typewriter, I think it was. And then I had I was an accounting major, so I worked with, and I keep these. This is lifelong deal. I use number two pencils. I used number two pencils in college. That's what I use today, and I use column pads to do addition because we didn't even have calculators then. And then I went into the Air Force, and I remember I was over in Japan, stationed over there, and these little hand calculators came out that was made by a Japanese company, Casio. It was $100 for a little hand calculator, and then eventually we got these PCs, personal computers, and so over the years, what I've seen is that um, technology changes, and then the opportunity is for organizations, whether school districts or whomever, to adapt to those changes. And so for me, that's my approach on technology. In 2018, when I first came back here, a few months after I came back to Charleston, I formed a group of about 30 people. These were district people, community people, and I had a consulting group, and we created over, I think, about a 6 month period, what we call 4 scenarios about the future of education in Charleston County. And each scenario had a title, and one of those titles, one of those names was one of the scenarios was called Tech Town. So we issued the report in January of 2019, and Tech Town assumed that education would shift more to a technology or virtual world. And this was a year before the pandemic. So we didn't have
Wow.
that expertise, we have that lens to look at. And what happened was uh, we didn't believe that really that was going to be a viable path. But then the pandemic hit and did become a viable path. And so we then, like many places, many districts across the country, we adapted to the reality of what was we were faced with, and we used available technology to support that. So that's what I see in our schools. I go into our schools now, and they are using technology. They're using technology a lot differently than I used technology when I was a kid, and that's because of technology has changed, and our folks that are being most successful are adapting to those changes.
When it comes to technology, it's all about adapting
Right.
and taking it as it comes because it is always changing. We in the virtual world, we are virtual teachers, and so we're constantly trying to adapt to that. And our CCSD students that are in Low Country Virtual Program, they're learning these new technologies as well. And so that's just something we always, as educators, have to keep in mind and keep up to date with.
Right. Exactly.
I'd love to hear more about your district's involvement in Low Country Education Consortium. Would you talk about the benefits of joining an educational consortium like LCEC, and how you collaborate with other districts, and what do you envision for the future?
There were kids that actually thrive better in that virtual world. And so because of that, the district's position is that we need to provide that as an avenue for those kids. So that goes back to identify the needs of each individual child and to provide the services that he or she needs. So I see a real need for a continuation of the Low Country virtual work that we're doing and the collaboration that we have with the other districts here in the state.
I have to agree with it. I mean, yes, it's my job, but also, it's so important when you're dealing with such a large district like CCSD. You have so many different types of families. And so providing those families with the option to choose what works best for them, I think that's so important. And being able to share the resources with other districts makes it much more viable to do so.
Yeah, and I agree. Like you said, technology, uh, adaptation is the key word that you think of, right? And you are keeping your feet wet within that adaptation, where you can say, you know what, we have a viable option for people that this works for, while still recognizing that you have some people that it doesn't work for. So you, just like Amy is saying, and you were saying, it is an avenue for the students that work best for them, you have that option for them. And that's what a great district does. It provides that opportunity.
Right. I agree. So, and the thing for me is that you mentioned, Amy, that we're a large district. So for me, I look at Charleston as a mid-sized district. So, you've got some huge districts in the country. New York City got 1 million kids, LA, 600-something thousand. I mentioned Fairfax County a few minutes ago. They got almost 190,000 kids. So I mentioned our size here in relationship to those types of districts, because I think what we have here is really, really manageable. We have to pay attention to the various needs of various communities, but we're such a size that we can draw resources in. So if you're really, really, really tiny rural district in the state of South Carolina, you don't garner a lot of financial resources. We have a lot of financial resources here in Charleston, and we're small enough to engage with our communities to be able to utilize those resources effectively to support these communities.
That's so true.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the initial question in the interview when you were looking back at some of these schools that you saw in the past, and you came back and you're like, well, hey, what happened? I thought, like, we're still in the same exact spot that we were in when I left. And I think that goes to show you, well, maybe it's a large district here, while you're looking at it in the grand scheme of things, this is a reasonable option that we can make a big impact on, because it is not as big as these other districts. And this is an opportunity that you can go in and make those changes and see the difference that it truly makes.
Right. Exactly.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kennedy, for joining us today and sharing your insight. We are so fortunate that Charleston is a member district of LCEC, and we love having Charleston families in our Low Country virtual program.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Listeners, if you would like to stay up to date with everything that Mr. Kennedy is doing for CCSD, please follow him on Instagram at supt.d_Kennedy, and check out Charleston's Twitter page as well at CCSD Connects. Thank you so much for listening.
This podcast is written, hosted, edited, and produced by a team of educators from the Low Country Education Consortium. Amy,
Caitlin,
Matt,
and Meg
are proud to bring you
Please Raise Your Virtual Hand.